Headlines, headlines.
Do we have a headline song?
I don't know, but I just made one up. It's based on
Go
Dora
for
the
it.
Explorer.
Go for it. Let's hear it.
It's headlines, 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 headlines.
All right. Okay.
You're
We're gonna
welcome.
we're gonna we're
Thank
gonna
you.
we're gonna
Acapella star over here.
I could do we could do a Paw Patrol version of that. I'm gonna. But let's get into it, right? I mean, you guys know I'm a avid reader of the New York Times, but only when I could get free subscriptions from my friends because I don't pay for that. I don't get past the
Heck
firewall.
yeah.
But this article stood out to me. HR making you miserable. So I dug into this one and I thought it was fascinating in a couple of different ways because I'm hearing HR complain, but I've kind of always hear HR complain because HR is the inbound complaint department. But now more than ever, HR is fielding things with remote work conflicts. Why could this person work? Why can't I work from home? But Susie's working from home, like that kind of crap, and dealing with just inter-office kind of stuff. And it's just kind of the same. Why would anybody want to get into this profession? Right? That's what I ask myself. But then I take a step back and I think about in my long career, all the amazing HR practitioners that I've had an opportunity to work with that have been there from a nurturing perspective, from helping me onboard, for helping me get set up with benefits and making selections and really being there as a resource, as a resourceful tool. But lately, there's a lot of contention out there. And this article actually taps into some conversations covered from Unleashed that Joel was at. Joel, when you were at Unleashed, did you have conversations around with HR people why they're so miserable?
I didn't, but look,
Joel
when I
doesn't talk to HR
yeah, I stayed away from HR. I was actually I
Smart
was
man.
actually I was
like
actually
everyone
really busy,
else.
but I think when I read this article, I actually thought a lot about recruiters. I thought about people in lots and lots of different skill sets, right?
TA
Not
isn't recruit HR.
well, the point is I don't think it's just HR that's
Mm.
even feeling this way. Like I got a lot of those vibes as like a lot of employees right now are burned out. I think it's
Yeah.
amplified with HR because they have to do some of the, they're kind of like the centerpiece with the return to office, right? Like you
Mm.
can't return to office without HR championing that, right? And
They have to be behind it.
Right.
it's like they're always delivering the bad news. Like imagine being at a startup that's gone through 3 rounds of layoffs over 2 years. If you genuinely care about people, which most HR people I've met genuinely care about people, that's why they get into the field. It's tough. It's like you are the face piece of that, those layoffs a lot of the times, right? You're the one who has to meet with people. You're the one who gets bashed. I put out some HR content before, which might, but has gone viral. That's not necessarily favorable of HR. So I could totally see this being a thing. But what I will say
You're
is
part of
a
the
lot of
problem,
HR
Joel.
people I know, they're also positive, right? And so like
Mm.
they will put on the positive face, right? And I think it's when they get together and you're talking to colleagues and you're talking to people peers that are doing the same
Mm-hmm.
job, that's when these conversations can come out more. So really wasn't a surprise to me reading this article.
Yeah, same. I would say, you know, all of that, but also on the heels of COVID, right? Like having to go through layoffs and back to office when no one wants to return to office. Yeah, I could understand where this was coming from.
It's frustrating.
And, during COVID, I actually had the honor and pleasure of leading an HR and talent acquisition and DEI community. And I saw how important it became, that role became during COVID of, well, okay, suddenly, the focus is on people and making sure that people can still do their work and people can show up for work even though they're working from home and it looks different and that they have the tools and that they can have the conversations they need to have. Like everything was placed on HR. And afterwards there was sort of this de-escalation. There's this, there's layoffs, there's, such bad burnout, especially with HR. In 2022, HR had the highest turnover rate of any job. That's according to
Mm.
LinkedIn. And
The
it
source.
makes sense. And now, they're basically being told to do what the C-suite says and to lay people off and to tell people to come back to the office when no one wants to, including them. And it's just kind of a sad
It's
situation.
it's a lack in a perfect environment there would be a collaboration and listening, right? HR is a listening tool, the ears to the ground, reporting up to the C-suite, being a partner And we're not seeing that. Now they're just order takers and following out, like, the orders. Hey, everyone's got to return to the office. Now, how the hell are we going to figure this out? How are we going to have human conversations with folks who have now relied on being home for childcare and elderly care and all these other things? And it's a real conflict because you're going to lose employees, and this makes it really tough. How do you enforce something? And, how do you make an exception for one person but not the others? That's too long for me to read. I'm not even going to read it. So that comment there is for everyone out there. And we're going to keep this one going. I want to talk about Joel's headline. Joel, bring us into your headline.
Wow, this one is something that I've been talking about a lot. I actually got called out for this on my TikTok channel, but it says the headline is America's hiring boom is officially over.
Boom.
And this is coming from the latest jobs report that came out that was basically showed that the amount of jobs added, I think it was like 114,000. They were estimating 180,000. But I want to say something really clear here. I think there's people who get entrenched in this data and numbers and more data and more numbers, and all they really need to do is just pull their head out of the spreadsheet and talk to people. And I think this headline becomes evident. And one of the things in this article that surprised me was they were like, yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere. And I'm like, what world are you living in where this comes out of nowhere? Like, as a recruiter who is friends with lots of other recruiters who have been laid off because there's no demand for recruiting, which means there's no demand for like growth and hiring.
No,
I haven't talked to anybody in the last 2 years that said, outside of AI companies that have said, yeah, we're looking at 10x, we're looking at double, triple in size. Nobody's talking about growth.
No.
So sometimes this is why I'm so big on just taking your head out of the spreadsheet and having conversations with people, talking to people in the HR community, the recruitment community. So I don't know, from either of you guys, is this a shock? Was that jobs report a shock to you? What was your initial
Not
reaction?
at all. And in the beginning of the article, it like made it seem like it was such a shock. I was like,
it's clickbait.
What the heck? And then by the end, it was sort of like, oh well, we've seen this coming, and it's not as bad as it like might seem, and yeah, we might be headed towards a recession, but like this is not the only number that we have to look at, to be an indicator. I think speaking of if we do end up going into a recession, I think that my best advice to people is that no job is secure. So focus on your side hustles, diversifying your income, and building relationships. Like I've been so surprised because I am such a self-starter and an overachiever, and I invest in my network constantly.
That's not
under skill section. It just says self-starter and
overachiever. But I focused on networking for the past few years because I haven't had the opportunity to be in an office full time and build relationships with people in the real world. And now that I am entering into that real world, I have relationships to continue to build, and I'm not just starting from scratch. And I've been really surprised by how many people kind of just sit back and they're like, oh yeah, like I have a job, like I don't need to network with people. And it's like, yeah, you do, because you don't want to be the person to ask for things only when you need something.
Only when you need something. Yeah, that's a rough one there too. And I think that us recruiters, we have our finger on the pulse. It's very simple. We know when companies are hiring and when they're not. Right? It's very simple. Am I busy? Am I not busy? And it's also obviously industry specific here. So I want to move on to the next one here, which I certainly have an opinion on. But Danielle, tee us up. Are summer Fridays on the decline?
Yeah. So basically, either summer Fridays are on the decline, but they're also shifting in terms of how they're being utilized. So back a few months ago, 11% of people said they have summer Fridays. And the policy basically allows people, if you don't know what a summer Friday is, to take a few hours or the entire day off during summer months. So in my personal life, I've actually seen my friends who have had summer Fridays. The summer Friday has now become work from home Fridays.
As opposed to not work from home?
As opposed to work from office, I guess, or not work at all, which it's not the same. And to argue that
if you're working,
Fridays
you're working,
and work from home Fridays are the same, it's just ridiculous.
Well, what about this one? I have a client that does they don't do summer Fridays, but they have no meeting Fridays, no meetings on Fridays.
I get down with that.
You're still
Yeah,
working.
that's another version, I feel like, of a summer Friday type of
And
thing. But no Friday is gonna be no Fridays are the same, guys. No
no,
Fridays are the same.
not all
I
Fridays are
I think
built.
when I look at this stuff, I honestly ask myself, or I just ask out there, I'm like, I think we live in a world where you're basically like always working. You're kind of like never working. It seems like we're in this like flux state because as
Hmm.
long as you have email in your pocket and as long as you're paying attention to those notifications, your mind is like on
In work.
work. So and I think it kind of goes to these points of these other conversations too, where we're looking at like AI, kind of replacing things or like taking over tasks. But then what happens is like instead of it making our lives easier, so we could have something like a summer Friday. It's like,
More work.
oh, AI is going to enable you to get even more work done, so you can be even more burnt out. And
Got it.
but
Yeah.
that's the state we're in, right? It's like anything to cut money, save money, and get more efficiency.
Y-
That is the mind of companies right now.
It's so.
It's more than ever before, I think.
Yeah, totally. And it's so funny too. I see this, and I kind of go back to when I used to work for a company, and I remember, pre-pandemic and everything. These ideas, summer Fridays, like, all right, Memorial Day to Labor Day. There's 12 weeks. You could pick 8 of those days, and you could either take half days, you could take full days. And people used to really work around that. They would plan their holidays, they would plan long weekends, they would plan vacations. And just to your point before, Joel, like, I mean, listen, I am an independent business owner, so I'm always on.
Yeah.
My wife is not. She works for a company, and I see it with her too. Even when she tries to take a half day, she's always following up on something. And I think it's just more of this culture that we live in that, like, if we're not paying attention, even when we're off, then we're
Yeah.
slacking, and it's a performance issue. And I think it's a much bigger kind of work culture. Like, let's just follow Europe, man. Everyone just takes off August. No one's working over
I
there.
agree. And actually in the article it talks about a company called Jellyfish, and they
Former
start.
client.
Oh, nice. And starting at 2 p.m. every Friday from June to August, people are free to use the time for themselves. And that might mean doing like a side project, learning a skill, but also spending time with their families
Mm.
or traveling and, doing the things that they got to do. And in my opinion, like that's the best way to encourage those high performers, right? Is to give them back some of that time that they have earned, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And, let's not forget about the 4-day work week because that is not dead, right? Like
No.
we've seen huge success with companies in terms of productivity, with morale, and that have incorporated this 4-day work week. And I don't think the conversation is over, even though we're going to be seeing more and more of a RTO, traditional working hours type of push in the fall. But I don't think that the pendulum is done swinging. It's going to come swinging back the other way.